Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where it's time for my weekend reading report. Yes, my weekend reading report, where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the past week and the stuff I'm going to be reading in the future and all the stuff that's shown up here at the Manor. You know, because a few things always seem to show up here at the Manor. So, let's talk about it. Roger, are you ready? Roger's thrilled. Look at him. A little warm today, It's a little warm today. Like it is everywhere on Earth, practically. I sure am glad global warming is just some crazy liberal myth. Otherwise, I might be worried. Those scientists just making stuff up. Man. Anyway, what did I read this past week? Okay. I finished this book. What book was this on the 500 book challenge? I can't remember. 500 book challenge. The challenge where I read 500 books that I own before I will buy any new ones. I'll put the number down here since I can't remember off the top of my head what number this is. This is The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. I finished this book and this book is fantastic. This is probably, well, it's almost certainly the best book I've read this year, at least of the books that I've never read before. This is really good. So this is an historical novel about the Battle of Gettysburg. If you've ever seen the film Gettysburg, you know what this is about. Because the film, I remember watching the film back when it came out, and as it turns out, it was really faithful to this novel. The difference is that in the movie, there was this big melodramatic music that just happened always for no reason. I mean, you can just, guys getting on his horse, and there's like, da 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 da. I mean, it's like the guy's getting on a horse. There's nothing's happening right now. Or a guy's just walking across the field. Da 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 da. I mean, it's like he's just, nothing's going on. Is this going to happen for all 4 hours of this movie? Yes. Yes, it did. Which was fine. It was a really good movie. But man, that music. So it just kept going on. Everything was melodramatic in that movie. Everything was dramatic. Everything. I get it. Gettysburg was a big deal. This worked better for me. There are a surprising number of bands playing, though, during the war, during the battle. They're marching the battle and there'll be like bands playing in the background. I guess I never really realized that about the Civil War, that bands would just show up and play music when people are marching to or from a battle. Great book. This book is fantastic, very involving. I loved every page of this book. I highly recommend this book. It is a fantastic historical novel. The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. I mean, as usual, when it comes to books like this, the hype is real. Everybody who says this book is great, they're all right. This book is magnificent. So I loved it. This I read for BookTube at War, a reading event created by the viewer DDB. And I'm glad he came up with this event, BookTube at War, because it got me to read this book finally. I've had this paperback sitting around forever, and it's great. So there's that. I read that. Now, it's not just BookTube at War going on this month, though. It is the summer of Book Trek. Book Trek's going on all summer long. Book Trek is a reading event created by Vin at Revenant Reads, where we read Star Trek books. And so I came up with another reading. I know, too many reading projects. I know. I came up with another reading project, the Star Trek Chronicles, where I'm slowly making my way through in chronological order of publication all of the Star Trek books I own, and that's a lot of Star Trek books. But, I'm just on number 2, and this is Star Trek 2 by James Blish. Star Trek 2 by James Blish. I read this. Not for the first time, but I read this and enjoyed it tremendously. James Blish wrote a series of, what was it, 11 books? Something like that? Where he novelized episodes of Star Trek into short stories. And he was working on the original, he was working from the original shooting scripts, which sometimes differ dramatically from the final episode that is aired. And you get that a lot in this. First of all, he didn't seem to know anything about Klingons. I guess back when this was published, I'm reminding myself, when was this originally published? It was 68, right? Yeah, it was 1968 when this was originally published. So early days in Star Trek. And not much was known about Klingons. And so it's no wonder James Blish didn't know anything about Klingons. And you can tell. And there was one episode, let me see which episode it was. It was Operation Annihilate, where it's so different. I mean, these really big, important things that were in the episode, as it finally aired, were not in this. And the entire end of the story, the resolution of the story was completely different. It's interesting. And so there must have been some pretty big changes while they were actually filming the episode, or right before they filmed the episode. So it's kind of interesting to read these just to see those differences. I kind of wish those original shooting scripts were available in book form, but I don't think they are. Let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't think they are. I think this is the closest we can come to that. And they are very entertaining, these James Blish Star Trek novels, or Star Trek books. They're a lot of fun. This one was a lot of fun. I love Star Trek, and so yeah, I blew right through that. So those are the two books I finished. I started another book. Now this is very exciting for me because I got in the mail a book that hasn't been published yet. I know this is something booktubers do all the time, but not me. I never get books before they're published. But this one is really cool because it's my favorite subgenre is sword and sorcery. And it's this book, Lord of a Shattered Land. I literally just started reading this morning because I just got this book in the mail yesterday from Baen Books. Thank you for sending this to me. It's by Howard Andrew Jones. Howard Andrew Jones. He's writing this series. The series is called The Chronicles of Hanuvar. The Chronicles of Hanuvar. This is book 1. Now, Howard Andrew Jones also happens to be the editor of Tales from the Magician's Skull, which is a sword and sorcery magazine. A very well-regarded sword and sorcery magazine. And he sent me some issues. If you saw last week, you know that he sent me some issues of Tales from the Magician's Skull. Thank you, Howard Andrew Jones, for sending that to me and this book. So this is sort of based on Hannibal and the Roman wars with Carthage. So Rome destroyed Carthage, and Hannibal was Carthage's greatest general. And the main character of this book is sort of based on Hannibal, sort of. So his country has been destroyed by an empire an awful lot like Rome, the Dervan Empire. It's called the Dervan Empire. But it's an awful lot like Rome, I think. And so they have destroyed our hero's country, Volanus, yeah. Hanuvar's country was Volanus, and Volanus has been destroyed, and the people have been taken into slavery. So Hanuvar is, like I said, he's a general, he's a seasoned warrior, the older guy, and he decides he's going to try his best to free all of the people that have been enslaved, all of his people that have been enslaved. And that's basically what this series is about, I think. Like I said, I just started it, and it looks like it's a series of short stories that have been turned into a novel, or a very episodic novel. I will tell you a lot more about it when I finish it, but so far I've just read a little itty bit, and so far it's really good. And there's a blurb on the back from David Drake. This wonderful work put me in mind of the stories I read when I was editing Bayan's Robert E. Howard library. Sold! Sold. So yeah, I'll tell you all about this when I finished it. It's good so far, and it's awesome that I got it. I think its publication date is August 1st, so look for this August 1st. So there's that. That's what I'm reading right now. The next thing I'll read is for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, the cheapest book club around, and that's going to be the August book, Gladiator by Philip Wiley. This is the next thing I'm going to read. Knock out the Roger's Cheap Old Book Club book so that we can wade right into the trash, because Garbogust is coming in August, the greatest reading event of all time, Garbogust! So, yeah, that's going to be fun. But I've also read other things. Comic books, of course. Comic books are awesome, so I'm doing the World's Finest Challenge, where I have challenged myself to read Superman and Batman every single day of my life. This has actually proven kind of challenging sometimes because my life is really busy. I literally get up at 4 o'clock in the morning just so I will have a wee little time to read comics. And what am I reading right now for Superman and Batman? Well, it's Superman and Batman. Superman and Batman, Supergirl. So Supergirl was missing from DC Comics continuity for a long while. At least the real Supergirl, you know, Superman's cousin, Kara. But finally, was it in 2004? I think it was in 2004. Let me see. Was it in 2004? I don't know. I don't have my glasses on. But it was around there when Supergirl actually finally returned. The original Supergirl, or a version at least of the original Supergirl. This is by Jeff Loeb and Michael Turner, the late Michael Turner, who was a really cool artist. And this was his first, I think this was his first superhero interior work for DC Comics. And he did a heck of a job. He was a really talented artist, and a fellow we lost way too soon. And he seems to be doing a heck of a job on this. I've read a couple issues into this, and it's really good so far. It's really good. So, yeah, I'm reading that. Still reading the Batman Silver Age Omnibus. I'll probably be reading this for a while. Batwoman has returned, as I told you that she would. Even though she's dealing with those sexist superheroes, Batman and Robin. Batman's telling her it's too dangerous to be a superhero as he drags a little child into combat and in front of, you know, criminals with guns. But that's okay. Batwoman showed up again, and she will show up once more. Well, she'll show up many times again because, you know, she's Batwoman. Not the terrible Batwoman that, you know, there was that TV show recently. That was awful. No, this is the original one. So I read that, and I've read a little bit. I think I've read one more story from Aquaman, the King of the Seven Seas. I'm enjoying Aquaman. He's not as cool or interesting as the Submariner. That is true. But, you know, I've never read much Aquaman, so I'm correcting that this summer by reading a whole bunch of Aquaman. So there's that. I also, you know, got some things in the mail. Other than this, I got some comic books. So, Garbogust is coming. And I did get a comic book to torture Steve Donoghue. Steve Donoghue and I, every week, we will do Epic Comic Book Wednesday. And I'll pick the comic, and we both talk about the comic. And for Garbogust, we have some real trashy comics showing up. And one of the trashy comics, I don't know if you remember this fella, is Prez. It's Prez. It's the teenage president from the 1970s. So this was a ridiculous comic book. I actually had a couple issues. I think there were only like 4 issues of Prez. But yeah, Prez, he came out in the 1970s. Basically, it was like, you know, they changed the law so that if you wanted a teenager to be a president, you can have a teenager for a president. And wouldn't you know it, in DC Comics, in the 1970s, you had Prez, the teenage president. So this is a really ridiculous, trashy comic. And so but of course they had to make a collected edition of Prez, and of course I got it. I know, I'll buy anything. And so now I have Prez, and I can have an epic comic book Wednesday about Prez. And somewhere Steve Donoghue is screaming. So there's that. What else did I get? Oh yes, because it is the summer of Aquaman for me. I got more Aquaman. This is The Search for Mera. Aquaman looks like he's had a hard time of it. The Search for Mera, I got that. And I also got Aquaman Underworld, the deluxe edition. Aquaman Underworld, the deluxe edition, which I know nothing about, but it looks cool, so I got it. And the artwork looks pretty cool. Looks like there's some cool stuff going on in this book. I know nothing about it. Nothing at all. Only that it's a new-ish Aquaman story. So I got it. Yeah. So Aquaman Underworld. Got that. And also, the last thing I will talk about is this. It's the Gold Key Archives of Star Trek. So I always liked these old Gold Key issues of Star Trek. Gold Key started making comic books of Star Trek when Star Trek had first come on the air. And they were really cool, even though everything was really weird, because the artist who drew Star Trek didn't know much about Star Trek. He'd never seen it. So he just had some photos of the main characters and the ship as reference, but he had no idea what the interior of a ship looked like. And so there was a lot of weirdness. There's a lot of weirdness in this comic book, but it is way cool. Here are our Star Trek people wearing peculiar outfits on a planet, because, the artist didn't know. He thought, well, maybe if you go down to a planet, you wear a different outfit. That changes later on. But he had the outside of the ship down pretty well, even if he didn't really know what anything looked like on the inside. Like, that's the transporter room looking a little wonky because he didn't know what the transporter room looked like. He really didn't know what anything looked like. Let me see if I can get a shot inside the bridge. Did he have one in these early issues? Everything's kind of vague in the early issues of Star Trek. The most distinctive character was Spock. Spock really stands out. But it's cool, and this reproduces the old the covers. I have an older collection of the Gold Key Star Trek comics, and I actually did, during the first book trek a couple years ago, I actually made a video about Gold Key's weird Star Trek comics. It is I think it might be my least watched video. I have some videos that nobody watched, and I think that was one of those videos. I'll link it down below if I could find it. It was a long time ago, and nobody watched it. But that's not true. I think maybe 200 people watched it, over all this time. So, which is, I guess, not bad for a video about Gold Key Star Trek. I'll link it if I could find it. But yeah, this was really cool. I tried to find volume 2 of this, and it's like $1 million. This is the third printing of the first volume of this. But if you want to get the second volume, it's like so stupid expensive that I probably will never get it. But I got the first one, so there's that. I think that's everything. Okay, guys. That's all I have to say today. I will catch you next time.